stay calm when people test your patience. I was working with a client yesterday who asked me a pretty blunt question, which was, what do I do when people are just doing my head in? Ultimately, what they were asking me is, how do I stay calm when people are seriously testing my patience? So what I'm going to share with you in this video are some tips around how you can develop the ability to do that, to be calm, to be patient, to keep being constructive and working to find solutions, etc. when, again, someone's seriously pushing your buttons. What I will say to you up front is this is going to take practice. Each of these tips are things that you need to consistently do over time for them ultimately to work for you. So again, I encourage you to take these tips, go into your workplace, put them into practice, and don't give up too early. Because again, as I say, it's something that needs consistent practice over time. Tip number one of the most powerful things we can have in the moment is empathy. Now, this can be super hard when we feel like we're under attack. So if the person is being aggressive or accusatory or deflecting and blaming towards us, our own emotional intelligence is incredibly important in that moment. So I can point to lots of examples in my career where people have been stressed, they've been distressed, they've been fighting for survival, if you like. They feel like their job is under threat. And my capacity to maintain empathy for that even though the way in which they're communicating is unhelpful and perhaps even somewhat offensive if we allow it to be, maintaining focus on where is this person coming from, what is their reality, what is causing them to respond in the way that they are, is a powerful way of remaining emotionally detached from it. So being the observer of their emotion and cutting some slack to some extent, obviously depending on the behaviour, but allowing people's emotion to flow without you necessarily feeling like you have to combat everything that they're saying. Now, as we'll go through the tips, I'm not suggesting for a moment that you just sit there and cop crappy behaviour. That's not what I'm saying at all. But if you can remain a little bit detached from it and observant of them, it will help considerably. So obviously there's lots of reasons why people behave the way that they do. Some people, let's be real, are just difficult by nature. And what I would say to you is if you have an ongoing issue with somebody where you do come to the conclusion that this is just part of who they are, they will always be argumentative or they will always be aggressive, then obviously you need to start questioning, do I actually have the right person in my team? But it's also true that even the most reasonable, sensible, most high-performing member of your team might have their moments. So they might be stressed, they might be tired, they may not actually have in that moment awareness of their own behaviour. In terms of how our brains work, if we are stressed, if we're feeling under threat, we will actually start to shift our thinking into, what is commonly called like a lizard brain. So the centre of our brain that is all about our survival. So people will slip into fight, freeze, flight mode. When they're in that space, they're no longer capable of actually being rational until they actually calm their nervous system and are able to, again, get back to a state where they can think logically. So the same is going to be true for you. If you find your emotions are heightened and you get triggered into that space, again, it's important to understand that you may no longer be thinking rationally yourself. And that's where it can just get to a place of escalation, and obviously the conversation is going to be undermined and you're not going to get very far. So to sum up tip one, it's all about understanding why the other person is reacting the way that they are and maintaining empathy for that. So tip number two is all about you, and that is your breathing. So as I mentioned, when we get triggered or heightened in our emotions, what we want to do is actually calm our nervous system so we actually can think clearly, so we can actually achieve that level of composure that allows us to be constructive. There's plenty of research that has shown breathing exercises has a very real impact on our nervous system. So one of the common ones that people often use is called box breathing, which is ultimately where we're breathing in to the count of 4. We're holding our breath for the count of 4. We're breathing out for the count of 4. And again, holding our breath, breathing in, holding, breathing out, holding, breathing in. And if you cycle through those a few times, that should start to have a calming influence and allow you again to get back to a clear headspace. Another tip is to create some mental space. And what I mean by that is we can actually put ourselves into the seat of the observer. So this is very related to what I was saying earlier around maintaining empathy. If you are able to step back and observe the person, observe the scenario, take a bird's eye view of this conversation, again, you might think that would be really hard to achieve, but with practice, I can assure you can get to that place of consciously choosing, okay, I'm just going to take myself back here for a moment, become the observer. When we do that, we go some way towards depersonalizing it, again, helping us to get back to or maintain a calm state. My next tip is to use a pause phrase. So this is all about creating a bit of time for you to think. So it might be something like, that's interesting. Let me think about that for a moment. Often when we're in these types of conversations, we feel like we just need to keep engaging in the conversation at pace. But I strongly advise that you slow things down, and asking these pause questions is one effective way of doing that. Is just an example. So again, I would encourage you to think about what might be your own examples. If you're in those situations, what could you say to create a bit of that time for thinking? My next tip is actually one of my favourites and one that I've been using myself for many, many years. And that is visualising negativity actually bouncing off you. So for a long time when I was going into a conversation where I thought that this is the way it was going to play out, I would visualise myself putting on a silver suit that would deflect any negativity coming in my direction. And again, that might sound a little bit wacky to you, but again, our minds are incredibly powerful. And if we tell our unconscious mind that we are protected, that this negativity is going to leave us, we're not absorbing it, we're not carrying it, we're not taking it with us outside of this room, it's amazing how well our subconscious mind can then help us to actually just achieve that and just to keep deflecting the negativity away. Because the more you engage in it, the more you're both going to actually spiral into a place that is unhelpful. My next tip is to get curious. Rather than, again, as I've said a number of times, getting into conflict and debate, when we're curious, we start to ask more questions. Through that curiosity lens, we're more likely, again, to maintain the empathy that I was talking about earlier. We're more likely to continue to see or be able to see, where is this person coming from? Why are they reacting the way that they are? So curiosity and empathy together are the most powerful things you can do to ultimately be able to navigate these moments where somebody else's behaviour or somebody else's emotion is causing this conversation to be, full of conflict or obviously destructive in some cases. My next tip is to think about to control your body language. Again, if you tune into your body, you may observe that your shoulders are crunched up or your arms are in a really defensive position. That's not just about what you're saying to the other person and therefore how they're likely to react to that. It's also about what you're telling your unconscious mind about the state that you're in. Physically relaxing our shoulders, getting into a comfortable seating position can go some way again to helping us to maintain that composure we're looking for. And then my final tip for today is know when to walk away. Some conversations are not going to actually get to a useful outcome, and actually knowing when it's time to say, look, I don't think we're actually dealing with this effectively or constructively. I think it makes sense for us to take a break, regroup tomorrow, regroup later on, whatever it might be, creating again that opportunity for you both to go away, reset, come back, try again, is sometimes ultimately what we need to do. If our empathy has failed us, if our breathing has failed us, if we haven't been able to achieve that constructive dialogue despite this person's behaviour, then call it Don't be afraid to do that. I would also say to you, sometimes we try to do too much with one conversation. So again, it's important to recognise when actually we need to have a series of conversations rather than trying to get the whole way there in one step. So thank you for joining us. If you enjoyed this video, please press that like button. If you have other tips, then please add them in the comments. Thanks for joining us.